Can this just fit in my pocket? Can it just, okay. Hello, I'm going to tempt you with food. I know I have to be careful what I say.
So I can start? All right. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. I'm Dr. Peter Nelson. I'm an outpatient internist here in Kettering, right by Lincoln Park. I'm here to talk about sleep as the health topic tonight. But as usual at these Wednesday night health talks, we have a health demonstration for a food item that we get to treat on. So Shona Maycomer, who I met this evening, is lovely, and she's prepared a nice, lovely treat for us. So maybe before we go over there and have her show us what she's doing, let's have a word of prayer and we'll get going. Dear Lord, thank you for the evening. Thank you for a beautiful summer day. Please help us to learn some tips about helping improve our sleep that ultimately can help improve our health. And may we have a safe rest of the week. In your name, amen. All right, so I think we'll join her over in the kitchen and then we'll come back and learn some stuff about sleep, hopefully.
Come on over. You lucky people who get to sample. Yay. Well, I'm Shona, and I am very interested in healthful eating because I'm a cancer survivor, and I want to keep it that way. And so I pay attention to the food I eat. But I also try to pay attention to other aspects of health besides food. And one of the main things, which is why we are here tonight in person, those of you that are here in person, is our social connection. I think is even more important than the items we put in our mouth. And so I've chosen to share with you a recipe tonight that I really enjoy for entertaining because it's fast and it's easy. It's got some redeeming value as well as some sugar and fat. So it's not a complete health food, but it's some brownies that have some ingredients in addition to the sugar and fat. So my philosophy is if I'm going to eat something that's sweet or serve a dessert, it needs to be something that contributes to my body that isn't just empty calories. And so that's what this recipe is. It's delicious, but it's also not just empty calories. So I found it in this cookbook, the Oh She Glows series. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen that, but her recipes are wonderful. This is actually the second one. And I found this gal, Angela Liddon, just looking online for a recipe for something vegan at one time. And I discovered that most of her recipes are online. So if you can just remember Oh She Glows, you should be able to find this recipe. But just in case you're interested, this is not what yours is going to look like tonight. But here's what she shows us about the potential. So that's a really social, strong thing. Isn't that socially strong? I know. But actually, the truth behind this, I'm not going to take the time to dig it up, but there's another picture that shows a spoon next to the brownie. And the key is that these are small servings. It's not like a brownie, although you could do that if you wanted. But our samples tonight are just small. And if you wanted to put a little dollop of a vegan ice cream, which is what they did, or real whipped cream with a raspberry on top and a little mint leaf, I mean, you would have a beautiful presentation. And that's the key, is we're doing beauty. We're mixing beauty and friendship together, along with some food that draws us together. So the recipe itself is actually very easy. As you know, brownie recipes don't have very much more than flour, eggs, and sugar, and some chocolate, and lots of oil. So this has kind of some basic ingredients that are based on that. She says they need to be added in order. So I kind of looked at that because that takes a long time. First thing she has us do is mix up some flax meal with water, and that becomes our egg because it turns real gelatinous and it holds things together. So we're going to dump this in the bowl in just a minute. But then after that, we're supposed to add everything in order. So I actually consolidated because it looked to me like she was putting some liquid ingredients in first. So we've got the flax meal, we've got maple syrup and vanilla, and then it's time to add some dry ingredients to that. So we've got arrowroot and cocoa, and I just mixed them together because it saved a lot of time. Here's where the good stuff is. This is just a third cup of sugar, and then the fat that we're using is almond butter. So really, we do have maple syrup in it, but the main sugar is just white sugar. I also brought something that I did not put in the brownies, but I thought you might be interested in knowing that. Espresso powder used in a very small amount, a very small quantity, like maybe even just a quarter of a teaspoon in a batch of this type of thing, really enhances the flavor of cocoa and chocolate. Yeah, without giving it a strong coffee taste. So if that's something you're interested in, you can be. So I've noticed that. I did mix this up earlier today, and it's no longer as liquidy as I want it to be, or as it's going to be. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit of water to that, just in case, because this is going to be what we need. You're going to see in a little bit that this is going to turn into a product that you're going to get your hands dirty with in order to really mix it up. So pour this in. So this is 3 tablespoons of water with 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed. And flaxseed is so good for you. I feel very, noble even eating it, and much less in brownies. So after that, we're going to add... We have 3/4 teaspoon of salt and only a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. So just that little amount makes a big difference. So we're just going to add that and stir that in. And then we're going to add some liquids to that. So we've got a 1/4 cup of maple syrup and a teaspoon of baking soda. We just added that. Vanilla. So I just mixed those together, again, just to make it really fast for tonight. You can see how if you're adding each one of those one at a time, it can take some time, and I think we can shortcut it. All right, so now the fun starts as far as it becoming a dough. We're going to be adding 2 tablespoons of arrowroot, which does the same thing that cornstarch does, only for people who have allergies to corn, which are a lot of us. It's just one way to get away from it. And then 1/2 cup of cocoa. And I'm using cocoa that is the 365 brand from Whole Foods. I really like the quality of that, better than like Hershey's or Trader Joe's or some of those lighter ones. It's a really dark cocoa. And you can even get into some fancy ones, and the brownies taste better. So really, your ingredients do make a difference. So what I've done is just added this in, and it's going poof and making kind of a mess. So you have to start stirring it really slowly so that you don't get that cocoa powder all over your kitchen, which we are probably going to do anyway. At least my kitchen looks like that. And after you've just stirred it for a little bit, it begins to wet the ingredients. And this part takes just a little bit of time. I used to use the whisk with some of the earlier ingredients, and then I tried using it at this stage, and I ended up with nothing but just a huge glob that I had to try to clean out of the whisk. So really just being patient and stirring it gently. Oh my goodness, this smells amazing. Can you smell the chocolate from there? Yeah. Yeah, I grew up living near the Hershey factory in California, and every time we would drive by, it would smell like this outside. So it's always, let's go to Oakdale. We want to smell the chocolate. Yeah, it's the same thing, only the West Coast version. Same company. So what we're getting right now is kind of a really stiff dough. And I want to get all of that powder as wet as I can. So guess what I'm going to be using pretty soon. But I don't want to get my hands too dirty yet because I still have a few ingredients to add. So this is really, really a stiff dough at this point. And then we're still going to add that sugar. So we'll go for that. And I'm sure if you experiment a little bit, you can find some more noble things to use. I haven't tried date sugar yet, but I would imagine that that could be a decent substitute if you want to get even more nutrition in there. I haven't really used a lot of the stuff like monk sugar and stevia and all that. If I'm going to eat dessert, I just want it to be dessert. So, but the other things may work well, especially, for people really needing to reduce their sugar. I'd rather just reduce my quantity that I'm eating and have it taste really good. All right, so we're just kind of getting to that point where it's going to get messy, but I want to open up this last jar before my hands get too bad. So this is just almond butter. And I'm going to dump that in, and then I'm just going to start kneading it like I would some bread. I used to teach art at Spring Valley Academy, and I had to learn how to play with clay in order to facilitate my job. And this is very similar to that. I have experience. I like chocolate clay much better. So. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, I didn't even pay her. Yeah, I do. I work as a professional artist now. I have a studio at home, and I do make these kind of messes sometimes, but mostly I work with paint, which I love doing. So now we're just going to kind of get this all mixed up. And the most important thing is to make sure that that almond butter is really mixed in. There have been times when I kind of did shortcut and didn't really worry about it being kind of marbleized with the almond butter. And it came out being really dry where that was. So it needs to be very well mixed. So this is where my artistic background comes in. This is called wedging the clay. It's exactly the same kind of feeling and texture that the clay would have. I'm really good at it because of this experience. No, I'm actually not very good at bread. My husband is, though. He makes amazing bread. So I'm more the dessert girl. But I like to cook healthfully. I've been cooking vegan food since well before it was popular. My daughter had a dairy allergy when she was young, and so we went with that. And we're kind of on a lone path 25, 30 years ago, and it paid off. But people did think we were quite weird. All right. So we're going to be putting this into a loaf pan. So instead of a brownie pan, which you would pour some batter in, we're going to actually be pressing this in. And I've lined it with some parchment paper because after it's done, the easiest way to get it out of the pan is just to lift it up once the dough is nice and cool. So we're going to just stick that in and press it out. And you could put any number of things on the top if you wanted to put some chunks of dark chocolate, the really, 80% cacao chocolate to add to your nutrition. You could do that. I tend to take a little shortcut, and I just keep a little bag of these mini chocolate chips on hand because they're super easy to use. And for like 2 teaspoons, hardly any, you could sprinkle on the top, and it just adds a little bit of flavor. Toasted walnuts would be really good on this, or pecans or whatever you want. So this is what we will pop into the oven. I'll do that when I get home because I've actually gone ahead and made another batch for you this afternoon. And that's it. They bake for about 24 minutes. Let them cool, pull it out, and cut them into pieces. And it's a really fast dessert that tastes great. If you don't mind, I'll just wash my hands real quick, and I'll pass out some samples for you. I practiced this hand washing today, and it was like, okay, there's no way to do this fast. You'll just have to ignore that I have brownie all around my fingernails. You understand. That's just a part of being a good cook, isn't it? All right, so here you go. These are actually a little bit more amazing right out of the oven because they're kind of melty and delicious. But I think you'll suffer through these just fine. All right. Any questions? It's simple enough that it doesn't really evoke a lot of like how-tos. So, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for enjoying. What do you think? It tastes pretty good? Yeah, I think they're really good. Oh wait, I forgot somebody.
I'll do it at the end as your reward.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, there, I have more. There's plenty.
Well, thank you so much, Shona, and I can't wait to try it at the end. It'll be a nice reward for the end of this talk, I think. So we'll let everyone migrate over. How's everyone doing tonight? Oh, good. So tonight we're going to talk about sleep. I know there's been a number of different topics, but I'm here to try to make the argument that maybe thinking about our sleep and trying to get better sleep is one of the best things we can do for our life and health and well-being. So have you ever thought, why do we sleep? Like, why do we take a third of our life, or supposedly a third of our life, 8 hours every single day, to lay down and be unconscious and not aware of the world around us? A third of our life. So if you make it to 90 years old, you've slept for 30 years of your life, which is crazy to think about it that way, right? So why do we sleep? You know, and we come to a lot of these health talks. People talk about food. People talk about nutrition in that way as, you know, the super important thing, which it is. People talk about exercise, and like that's seemingly what these health talks are usually all about: food and exercise and activity. And those are important pillars for our health, but I'm here to say I think sleep is the foundation for our health. And the reason for that, everything we do, either in our brain, in our muscles, every physiological and biological function within us is improved when we get good sleep and is worsened when we get bad sleep. So it's really this key to everything working well. And another reason, you know, to think about why do we sleep, so whether you believe we were created and thoughtfully made or we evolved from something, again, a third of our time is spent sleeping, and we, like every other animal on Earth, sleeps. And if you think of, okay, what is a priority for animals? Animals want to find food, they want to find a mate to have babies, and they want to not be eaten by something else. Those are the three priorities of every animal on the Earth. And so for an animal to spend a third of their life, give or take, depending on the animal, to not be doing those three things and actually not finding food, not finding a mate, and actually opening ourselves up for being eaten by a predator, I think speaks to the power of why sleep is important to us. If it was not that important, we would have gotten it out of our life. We would, only be sleeping 2 hours a night if we could. Unfortunately, we live in a world that has kind of stigmatized sleep. If you sleep too much, you might be called lazy. I'm the first generation of doctors that was trained with work hour restrictions. So before me, when you went to residency, you could basically work as long as they wanted to work you. So the average hours per week was about 120 hours a week. So when I went through, there was a national law saying you can only work about 80 hours, give or take, in a week. And if you go over that, you're going to get in trouble as a hospital in a residency program. And so as you go through, I think I was the first year that worked under those rules. So all of my bosses worked under the old rules. Our whole class for the entire time of residency was essentially called lazy because we didn't have it as hard as the previous people working on no sleep or working 48 hours straight or whatever, right? Because someone in the country prioritized sleep and said, hey, maybe if we let doctors actually sleep, they'll make less mistakes, they'll be better doctors, they'll learn easier, like life gets better when you sleep. If you look at our life, at least in our country over the last 100 years, we've deprioritized sleep. So 70 years ago, people on average slept about 8 hours a day. Now it's about 6.5 hours. And that recommendation you always hear, oh, you need 8 hours of sleep a night, that is true. We need about 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep. So we've created a world for ourselves between our family, between work, between all these things that said, sleep can kind of take a back seat. Let's do all this other stuff, and you can sleep when you sleep. I want to describe kind of what sleep is. So sleep isn't just being unconscious. There's a difference between being unconscious and sleeping. If you're a boxer and you get punched in the head and you fall over unconscious, when they wake up, they don't think, man, that was a great sleep. Like they were unconscious for some chunk of time. If you're in a car wreck and get in a coma, you don't wake up and say, that's a fantastic sleep. So sleep is something very different than just being unconscious. How we describe sleep is, someone puts stickers on your head and they can kind of tell when you fall asleep, and it's described through this like electrical pattern that happens in our brain. And so people can tell right when you fall asleep because these electrical patterns start to change. And then as we go through the night, you've probably heard we have a sleep cycle, and that's essentially what this graph is. So we start on the left side, and the top of the graph is asleep or awake. And as you go down through 1, 2, 3, 4, that's kind of our deeper sleep. And then you'll see highlighted across the top is REM, or rapid eye movement. So that's another stage of sleep. So we kind of have these 5 stages of sleep that we kind of cycle through. You'll see the non-REM sleep, which is all the black line in that graph. This is where our deep sleep happens. And our deep sleep tends to happen in the first half, or more so in the first half of our night. What it's thought of is this is where our body recovers. So we repair injuries. We kind of deal with all of the toxic buildup of the previous day. Deep sleep is thought to be where we store our memories from yesterday. So it's like taking our memories like a computer and putting them into a hard drive like for later. It's one of these stages of sleep. So people say, okay, how can I get more sleep? I want to prioritize getting more sleep or deep sleep. Your brain does it automatically. So if you're deprived of deep sleep, your brain will prioritize giving you more deep sleep. If you're depleted of REM sleep, which is also just as important, your brain will give you more REM sleep. So there aren't like strategies to say, how do I get deeper sleep or how do I get more REM sleep? Like your brain kind of figures out what you need and gives it to you accordingly. So for a long time, everyone, I need more deep sleep. We don't really care about non-REM sleep or REM sleep. But REM sleep is arguably just as important, if not more important, than non-REM sleep. REM sleep, this is our shallowest stage of sleep, so we're kind of almost awake. This is where we think we kind of dream most of our time. Whether we dream in deep sleep, it's kind of unclear, but we at least remember our dreams from REM sleep a little bit more. What they found that this is actually our built-in therapist. This is our mental health part of our sleep. This is us dealing with our anxieties and stresses every day. I like to think of this as our built-in rock tumbler. So when we have something tragic happen in our life, think of that as like a really sharp rock. When someone passes away, like I don't want to think about that too hard because if I think about it, it's emotionally sharp and damaging to my brain. You get sad, you get mad, you get angry, whatever. This REM part of sleep is like taking that sharp object and putting it in a rock tumbler so that over time, like it's not as sharp, right? 3 months out, 6 months out, 12 months out, thinking about the passing of a loved one isn't nearly as emotionally tragic as the first week. So REM sleep is very important just for our mental health. REM sleep is also important for preparing for the next day. So when I talked about non-REM helping us form memories and keeping them long-term, REM sleep is important for kind of laying the groundworks for tomorrow's memories. So it's helping us kind of gear up for tomorrow. And as you see, it's kind of more in the later half. So this is an 8-hour cycle. So when you cut that down to 6.5 hours, which is our now average, you're cutting out something. You're cutting out deep sleep or REM sleep, depending on which side of the graph you're cutting out. And remember, 6.5 is an average, so I still try to get 8 hours of sleep, which means someone out there is getting 4 hours of sleep to average me out at 6. Okay. I think we all know being tired is pretty miserable, and so we know, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm going to feel tired, and I don't think I need to argue why we need to get good sleep, because we just feel better. But I'm going to go through some of the health effects that happen from not sleeping enough. So this is our guide that we're going to work around kind of each of the different body parts. The first I want to talk about our brain, or kind of thought process. They're learning a lot that there is this large connection between sleep deprivation and Alzheimer's or dementia, which I'll go through here in a little bit more detail in a minute. As I talked about, worsening mood anxiety. So if I'm sleep deprived and we get rid of that REM sleep, which is like my built-in therapist, my mood and anxieties and stresses aren't really relieved from the prior day. So I'm waking up with that still inside of me and now building on to it with another stressful day and another stressful day, and it just keeps building on. Anyone that stayed up till 2 a.m. probably knows about poor impulse control. We don't usually make the best decisions in terms of what food or snack we might eat at midnight or 1 a.m. People make bad, parental saying of nothing good happens after midnight. That's poor impulse control. Talking about Alzheimer's. So this is a cartoon of our brain. The neurons are those big yellow sun-looking things. They're the things that conduct electricity and impulses around our body and brain. All the other colored spider and alien-looking things are all the just support cells. These are the things that kind of hold everything in place and give health to the cells. These are called glial cells. For a long time, they just thought they were the glue that kind of held everything together, and it wasn't always necessarily clear what they did. But as we've learned more of what these support cells do, so before I talk about that, what they found they do, so remember when I said we put stickers on our brain? So that when we put a sticker on your brain and you're thinking about, man, that brownie was good, man, I'm ready to go to sleep tonight, wonder what I'm going to have for breakfast tomorrow, 4th of July was really fun, I'm looking to the left, I'm looking to the right. Your brain is doing a lot of things all at the same time, and so that creates this static pattern across the top. When you fall asleep and you dive down into that deep sleep, that stage 3 and stage 4, this is what your brain electrical activity starts to do. It's actually like a pulsing. It's the only time that your brain is synchronously pulsing all at the same time. What happens when you pulse is all of these support cells, the brain actually shrinks just a little bit. And what that does is it actually opens up these channels to allow drainage in the brain. So when you're awake, it's low level, it's kind of toxic to the brain. Byproducts of being awake are released and they're kind of like garbage. And if we don't have enough sleep is what opens up the channels to get the garbage out of the brain. So this is a picture of a brain. So on the left side are all the, you see bright red. On the right side, you see the bright green. So the brain on the left is asleep. That's the space around the neurons that opens up, that allows drainage of kind of all these toxic things that build up in our brain when we're awake. So it's about 60% more space when you're asleep for this drainage to happen. This allows the exchange with our spinal fluid, which goes all the way down our spine. Now, this is another picture of the same thing, these brain cells that kind of look like alien suns. And on the right is a picture of, again, a cartoon of Alzheimer's, which one of the hallmark things on biopsy when people look at brain cells in someone with Alzheimer's dementia are these compounds called amyloid plaques. It's kind of this type of protein that kind of shows up and fills the brain. It's not quite clear. They think that it's very they think it's one of the causes of Alzheimer's, but they're not, I'll say it's still unclear whether it's the cause or just a byproduct of dementia, but it's one of the hallmark things of Alzheimer's is the buildup of these plaques. So what happens is, go back to our channels opening up so we can drain all the garbage. One of the garbage is these plaques. So this is a brain after one night of less sleep. So the brain on the far left is a brain that got more than 7 hours of sleep. The middle brain is 6 to 7 hours. The brain is less than 6 hours. And the red spots are buildup of that amyloid plaque. So they can see this in one night. So they've also seen it where they sleep deprive a person, they stick a needle in their back where they can take the fluid out, and they can see just in one night of sleep deprivation, so like less than 6 hours, there is an increase in these plaques that are in the fluid. So just one night, we start to see an increase in these things that are linked to dementia. So imagine doing that night over night over night over night for decades and decades and decades. Is there some connection there? We'll move on. So poor sleep also interacts with how we interact with our food. So when I eat food, I break that down into lots of different things, but one of those things is sugar. And my body's response is to release a chemical called insulin, which is the key that unlocks the door to allow sugar to move into a cell. Poor sleep deprivation, makes insulin, that key, not work as well. So that means I'm going to have higher sugar because the sugar has nowhere to go. It's going to hang out in the blood. That means my pancreas is going to have to work harder. It's going to have to release more insulin, more keys to make that happen. They've also found when people are sleep deprived and then get put into an exercise program, they don't build as much muscle as quickly. They also don't burn as much fat as quickly. So again, even for equal exercise, sleep deprivation makes our exercise not as effective. If I take two people, sleep deprive one and let the other one sleep normally and put them on a diet, like we're going to calorie restrict them, the person that sleeps better loses more fat than the other person. We talked about impulse control, if I'm less slept, I'm going to make worse choices about my food. There's lots of hormonal changes that happen with sleep deprivation, changes in testosterone, changes in our menstrual cycles, things we probably don't want to have happen. There's connection with cancer. So they can only do this in mice. So some of these studies, it's kind of a funny off thing. We can't even do some of the sleep deprivation studies in humans. So it's been deemed so untenable to health that we can't even do a controlled study where I'm going to keep you up for 5 days straight, because we know it's so detrimental to your health. I can randomize you to drugs we've never used before, but I can't keep you awake. I can't keep you awake because it's that dangerous. So some of this stuff we can only learn from animals because we think it's safer to do that to mice than ourselves. But they took mice, genetically equal mice, and gave them exactly the same cancer, and sleep deprived one group of mice and let the other sleep normally. The ones that were sleep deprived, their cancers grew bigger and metastasized more often. This idea of night shift it's been labeled a probable carcinogen. That means if you're a person that has worked at night, a nurse that works 4 nights a week, your chances of cancer are higher than if you were a day shift worker. If you're a night worker, on average, you live about 7 to 8 years less than a day worker of your equal job. So it's been connected to increased cancers. And then there's connection to heart disease. So a really interesting one is we actually see an increase in heart attacks after daylight savings time. So everyone loses an hour of sleep. So instead of your normal 7 or 8 hours of sleep, you get 6 to 7 hours that fateful Sunday night in spring. And we actually see increased heart attacks for the next day or two after. So even just sleep deprivation for 1 day is enough to increase the inflammation to cause heart attacks. And we'll see an opposite decrease the day after daylight saving time, begins or ends, whichever one in fall. But when we get an extra hour of sleep, people have less heart attacks. So this was an interesting study. So why does it do all these things all around our body. So healthy adults were limited to 6 hours of sleep per day for a week. Just after 1 week, 700 genes were changed. So what do I mean by that? So the way to think about genes are like light switches. You're born with a ton of light switches. It doesn't mean they're all on, though. Certain things we do in life turn switches on, which turns the activity of the switch on. Other things we do turn the switch off. If I smoke, I might turn on a lot of switches for lung cancer. If I eat a lot of kale, maybe I'll turn some off. If I sleep deprive myself, just after 1 week, I'm going to start turning on 700 switches. And these switches were all connected with either worsening immune system or increased inflammation and tumor production and stress and all these kinds of things. So that's just, again, after 1 week. Something interesting about immune systems. So one way they looked at this is they took 2 groups of people and, again, sleep-deprived one group. So usually it's less than 6 hours when I say that. And the other group, they slept normally, and they got their usual flu dose, yearly flu vaccine. The response to how many antibodies were made was about half in the sleep-deprived group. So we talk, all this world where we talk about vaccines and all that kind of thing, it's probably worth getting a good night's sleep before you go get your vaccine. It'd almost be worth, if you have a horrible night's sleep, rescheduling your vaccine for another day where you have a better sleep. This is an obvious one, I think, but one that often, I think, gets neglected is, again, poor sleep, less than 4 hours, you're almost 12 times more likely to be in a car crash. That's why commercial driver's license people have to come get checked for sleep disturbances. But, college kids, young kids, older people, everyone is sleep deprived at times, and being careful about what we do on the drive. Part of this is thought to be caused what's called microsleeps. So you're driving, and without even knowing it, your brain has kind of slept. You kind of think you're still awake, but just for a split second, you sleep, which means when the car in front of you brakes, you don't quite brake quite in time, and you rear end them, or someone walks out in front, or whatever, what have you. I'm going to talk a little bit about, how can we sleep better? So a little bit of that is understanding how do we sleep? How can we have a healthy sleep pattern? So this is our circadian rhythm that kind of oscillates throughout the day. This is our internal clock. This is how we all lived before clocks were invented. So it starts to drive us awake kind of around the sun wakes up, kind of drives us to sleep right around the sun goes to sleep. It's pretty static throughout life, and there are a number of chemicals that drive this rhythm, but this is kind of our internal rhythm. And everyone has their own rhythm that's slightly different. Some people are a little bit later, that we call night owls, and some people are morning people. Some people's sleep problems are just that they are a night owl living in a morning person's world. So we have designed a world for not night owls generally. School starts at 8 in the morning. You better be at 8 in the morning as a 6-year-old. Work starts at 7 in the morning. Whether I want to or not, whether I'm tired or not, I'm at work at 7 in the morning. So that's hard for a night owl who would rather sleep from midnight to 8 to be at work at 7 in the morning. They're always going to be shortchanged their sleep because their natural pattern is going to want to be midnight to 8. If we look at people, an interesting way to think about our sleep is looking at people like the undiscovered people, so like people that live out in the middle of the Amazon in Brazil and stuff, people that haven't really encountered electricity or Western civilization or any influence from the outside world. They've watched how they sleep. The natural sleep pattern for a human in that environment is they fall asleep about an hour and a half or 2 hours after sundown. They wake up about half an hour before sunrise. They might take an hour, hour and a half nap in the middle of the day. That's kind of how a non-technological society sleeps. Okay, what are one of the chemicals that drives our sleep? This is a chemical called adenosine. So, how I mentioned when you are awake, it is low-level stressful to the brain. So the moment you wake up, your brain is producing a chemical called adenosine. And this is building up, building up, building up all day long. That's that yellow line. At some point, it reaches a level that starts to click in your brain, kind of getting tired. And then it's that sleep pressure. And the later we stay up, that pressure will build and build and build until like you just can't give in and you go to sleep. This is one of those drivers of things that make us sleep. All right, these are two, this isn't going to be a chemistry lecture, I promise, but these are two chemicals. I'll give a hint. The one on the right is adenosine. Any guesses what the one on the left is? And we can kind of see how that part looks like that part, right? So the one on the left is caffeine. All right, so what does caffeine do? So caffeine works on the receptors in the brain, the same receptors adenosine works on. So when adenosine connects to your brain and says you're tired, that's how you know you're tired. Caffeine slips in there and connects to those same ones. So all of a sudden you don't feel so tired anymore. You're still making adenosine, so all day long you're still making this, but you're tricking your brain into thinking, well, you're not that tired. And that is why caffeine works, and everyone drinks coffee in the morning and soda in the afternoon, and we're caffeine addicted. The problem comes, for some people, caffeine can stay in your system 12, 16 plus hours. So if you drink your coffee at 9 in the morning, it might still be half of it still might be in your system by midnight. So that pressure to go to sleep isn't there anymore. Like we're tricking our brains and we're wondering, why am I not tired at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night when I'm supposed to be tired? I mean, that one cup of coffee, and then, I have patients that drink half a pot of coffee every day, or they'll have afternoon coffee or soda in the evening or whatever, right? Like drinking caffeine in the evening, you may feel like it doesn't do anything to you, but I don't know. I think there's very few people it probably does nothing to. I think it does something to most of us. The other issue is, if we don't get enough sleep, we may not get all so when we go to sleep, we flush the adenosine out. Remember, just like we flush out those amyloid plaques from Alzheimer's and all that kind of stuff? Well, this is the other chemical, one of the other chemicals we flush out during our sleep. If I don't get adequate sleep, I don't flush out all the adenosine. So I wake up with more adenosine in my brain, which means I'm going to wake up feeling more tired than I probably want to feel. And so we get in this vicious cycle of I wake up tired because I didn't get enough sleep, so I'm going to drink caffeine to wake myself up, and then the next night I'm not tired because I drank too much caffeine in the night, so I'm sleep deprived. So the next day I woke up with even more adenosine in my brain, I'm super groggy, so I'm going to drink 2 cups of coffee today. And then that night I'm not that tired because I drank 2 cups of coffee today. And like it's a vicious cycle that continues our entire adult working life, seemingly. All right. This is kind of a funny picture. The whole team is in on trying to go to sleep, but our brain acts like it's trying to be in, but we can see his hand is nowhere near trying to participate. So we're going to talk about, okay, we know all the bad things that happen with poor sleep. We know a little bit of the chemistry of why sleep happens and maybe why it doesn't for some of us. But we're going to talk about some key tips that help us sleep better. Number 1 is a schedule. So this is probably the most important thing we can do for our sleep, is having a routine schedule. That's go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Weekends, work days, doesn't matter what it is, wake up and go to bed the same time. And actually I would say we should focus on the wake up. I can't necessarily control myself when I want to go to sleep. Like I can't force myself to be tired. The thing I can force is what time I can wake up. And remember, our curve starts when we wake up. We start building more adenosine when we wake up. So some people trying to get on a better sleep cycle, I tell them you're going to have a couple weeks of really horrible, tired days, but set an alarm for whatever time you desire to wake up, and that is your new wake-up time. You're going to wake up, you're going to force yourself to get out of bed, you're not going to allow yourself to nap at all. We are going to be super tired so that when 10 o'clock comes at night, you're going to be so dead tired, you cannot wait to go to sleep. That is building that cycle back. We do ourselves a discredit by sleep depriving ourselves all week, working jobs and then sleeping 6 hours at night. I'll make it up on the weekends. I'll sleep 12 hours on the weekend. Like, it just throws our whole cycle off by trying to make up for it on the weekend, which doesn't actually work. There's no like sleep credit. There's not a bank of sleep that I can just withdraw from. It's either I did it last night or I didn't do it last night. So this idea of just a regular cycle, which goes in with try not to sleep in and avoid napping if you have sleep problems. So napping can be healthy. Like if you sleep a good 7.5 hours at night and you have an hour nap in the afternoon, like health-wise, there's nothing wrong with that. Only avoid napping if you have trouble sleeping at night. This is a joke in med school. It's like there's only 2 activities that should happen in bed, and they both start with S. And I'll give you a hint. One of them isn't social media, okay? So one of these is we're forming a habit with our brain. So what we want to build is a relationship in our brain that our bed is for sleep. Like this core association that when I get in bed, it's actually triggering in my brain like, oh, hey, it's time for sleep. Like this is what I'm doing here. Now, we've done a disservice to our beds because we've brought TVs into our bedrooms, so our beds have just become like really comfortable couches, or we bring our office work into our beds, so our beds just become really comfortable desks. That starts to disassociate like sleep and bed, because now all of a sudden when I get in bed, well, is it for sleep? Is it for watching TV? Is it for doing paperwork? Is it for hanging out? Is it for doing this? Like, what is the bed for? So sleep is the thing that happens in bed, okay? Everything else happens on a couch, at a desk, at a table, somewhere else more comfortable. This is a cartoon, so I think some people's lives have looked like this in their bed. Okay, after a schedule, part of that schedule is a wind-down routine. So most people think of sleep like a light switch, that I'm awake, I'm through the day, I flip a switch, now I'm asleep. We really need to start thinking about sleep like we're landing a jumbo jet. They start announcing that about 45 minutes before you land, like, okay, start putting away things, we're going to start putting flaps up and wheels down and this and that, and right, I don't know, I don't fly, but there's a long process of leading up to touchdown. And that's kind of what we're doing with our brain. We're going to have this lead-in process so that right when it's time to sleep, our brain is already there. Part of this is we need to mimic night. So sleep problems, like before 100 plus years ago, really weren't a problem. Most houses in the country didn't have electricity. So if it got dark at 7 o'clock at night and you were at candle or fire, like how much stuff are you going to do? You don't have TVs, you don't have tablets, you don't have iPhones. You're going to read a book by candlelight if you could afford a book. And you're going to get pretty bored really quickly and you're going to go to bed. So we've invented daytime at night. So we need to start mimicking the sun. When the sun goes down, these overhead bright lights need to start going away. We're going to put more mood and dim lighting on. We're going to mimic nature a little bit more. Part of this is, okay, we're going to turn off screens. Screens are just activating things. They rile us up. We get interested. We go down rabbit holes. We watch the news, which makes us mad, depending which channel we listen to. These things aren't usually relaxing. So we want to replace it with relaxing things. Reading, stretching, taking a bath, kind of our nighttime routine. So this last hour and a half before bed, this is me time of protecting myself. The next is, I think, the obvious stuff of your bedroom has to be comfortable. So quiet and dark and cool, which these are all easy advices to think about, but we don't take seriously. We let it be hot, and we let our dog sleep right next to us, and our fan kicks on at 2 a.m. and we don't think about it, but it wakes us up. We don't always take these things seriously. This can be challenging, but removing the disruptors. This is challenging, I think, in a relationship, because if your neighbor, your partner snores a lot, that keeps you up. It's hard to tell them to go sleep in another room, because I mean that connection is important, but sleep is also important. So like having that honest conversation with partners that keep you up, or partners that come to bed 2 hours later than you and wake you up, or partners that wake up 2 hours before you and wake you up, like there are these kind of things that wake us up related to our spouses or partners, and I don't know, having that honest conversation that sleep is important. How are we both going to maximize our sleep, that I'm not waking you up and you're not waking me up? And I don't know, I'll just keep saying this on every slide. Remove technology. But this is more than just even your phone, which might ding in the middle of the night or might light up because someone texts you at midnight and then it wakes you up. This can even be your clock. I have a lot of patients that focus on their clock because they're having a hard time sleeping, so they look over at their digital clock and it says 10:15. And then they toss and they turn and they look over and it says 10:17. And then they toss and they turn and like, oh, I thought it was an hour, it's only 10:20. And so people perseverate on watching their clock. So even getting clocks out of their room or putting a t-shirt over it that like, I'm not going to watch a clock. And part of that routine, as I was talking about getting in bed, we want to practice that routine of I get tired, I get in bed, I fall asleep. So after 10 or 15 minutes of if you're not asleep, get back out of bed, do your relaxing thing until you're tired again, and we're going to practice that again. I'm tired, I get in bed, I fall asleep. We don't want to practice, I get tired, I get in bed, I toss and turn, I look at my phone, it's an hour later. Oh, come on, I'm going to go drink warm tea, I'm going to get back in bed, I toss and turn, 2 hours later. Like, we're going to practice, I get tired, I get in bed, I fall asleep. Changing, and I should have prefaced this, changing your sleep is one of the hardest things you'll do. Don't give up. It takes patience and lots of nights of trying. It's not going to get fixed in one night. It might take weeks, it might take months. Our sleep habits have gotten us this far. You know, I'm 35. All right, my sleep habits are from 35 years of 365 nights of practice. So if I have bad sleep habits, it's because like I've practiced thousands and thousands of times the wrong way. I might have to practice thousands and thousands of times the right way for it to fix itself. Some other daily habits that can help: exercise. So I know I talked about how sleep is better than exercise or food on the first slide, but exercise is great too, and exercise makes you tired and makes it easier to fall asleep at night. But avoid, again, maybe for the hour or two before bed, because exercising vigorously will increase our temperature of our body. And one of the things that triggers us to sleep is when you fall asleep, your body temperature actually drops a couple degrees, which is why being in a cool room and those kinds of things is nice. So if we increase our body temperature from vigorously exercising, it can make it more hard to fall asleep. Avoid alcohol. So some people drink alcohol, and because it relaxes them and makes them tired, they fall asleep. If we go back to that first graph about REM and non-REM sleep and how REM sleep is our mental therapist, alcohol is shown to disrupt and decrease REM sleep. So just like how I was talking about a vicious cycle of caffeine and being awake, alcohol and mental health has that connection too for some people. I come home, I'm stressed, so I'm going to drink alcohol to relax myself. If I drink too much alcohol, it disrupts my REM sleep in the night, so I don't actually have the mental health improvements in the middle of the night. So I wake up stressed, and I go to work stressed, and that stress builds again, and I come home even more stressed, so I'm going to have a second drink that night, right? Like we get into this vicious cycle where alcohol becomes our therapist, and alcohol disrupts our built-in mental therapist, which is sleep. And, as I mentioned before, try to avoid caffeine. If you're having trouble sleep, either altogether or at least 12 to 14 hours before you anticipate going to bed. There's several things that happen with technology. I know we've touched on this a little bit. Technology interacts with our melatonin system. So this is another chemical I didn't really talk a lot about, or any about. Melatonin, what its job is it's kind of like the traffic cone guy at the airport saying, hey, it's time to sleep. It doesn't drive us to sleep. It's just the signal to your brain saying, hey, you should probably start thinking about sleep soon. So phones decrease that drive. Phones have also shown to reduce our REM sleep, which again is our kind of mental health dreaming state. Probably the biggest danger of technology is procrastination, right? Like you get on social media or whatever, or YouTube or the news, and you start going down rabbit holes of I'm going to watch this video and then this link and that video, and all of a sudden 2 hours later have passed. Dependency. This isn't necessarily common, but I actually hear a lot about this in teenagers and like young kids of they wake up in the middle of the night to check their phone. So that's bad. That's bad, I think. It happens to us though too, probably. I don't know, but I've actually heard that a lot in teenagers. And then there's this anticipatory anxiety that even our first moments of waking aren't relaxing because it's like the first thing we do is we roll over and check our phone and, oh, what message did I get? Oh, who called me? What text messages did I miss? What's my email looking at? Who's on Facebook? What did the president say? What did the ex-president say? Etc. And they're noisy. So let's not be this version of Sleeping Beauty on our telephones. So this is my last slide, but if you want to learn more about sleep, this gentleman, Matthew Walker, he's a sleep scientist from either Stanford or UCSF, somewhere in the Bay Area. He wrote a great book called Why We Sleep. He's also, if you don't want to read but you want to watch something, there's lots of great interviews he gives. I learned more like listening to him about sleep than I did in any rotation. I did a sleep rotation in med school. I did a sleep rotation in residency where I follow a sleep doctor. I learned more from this guy than I did in any of those. So look that guy up. It's great. And he's British, so when you listen to him talk, the interviews are feel like you're really taking something in. All right. This is a nice quote from him, but he goes out to say, working on your sleep is something you can start tonight. Working on diet, okay, that might take some skill, that might take some knowledge, that might take some income to go buy some healthy food. Exercise, that's going to take some motivation to get going and a routine. But working on our sleep is certainly going to improve our life, and it's something you can start tonight for free. So I hope I've made a case that sleep is important. I think we all knew sleep was important, but here's some science behind why sleep is important. And I hope we have a great sleep tonight. So, thank you. I guess any questions? I'll open up to questions. But, yes?
How do you feel about sleep aids, I guess
Sure, yeah. They're challenging. Okay, so be wary of the stronger ones like Ambien or like some of the benzodiazepines that people use for sleep and stuff like that. So those are like the ones that are used as sleep aids. All right, the issue with Ambien is it doesn't actually help you sleep necessarily. What it really does is it makes you unconscious. And then while you're unconscious, your brain sleeps. So at the end of the night, you're like, oh, I was unconscious for 8 hours, but you don't necessarily feel more relaxed or those kinds of things. It makes you unconscious to allow your brain to go to sleep. But people will, again, stick those stickers on, and people take Ambien, and they'll be unconscious for some chunk of time before their brain starts going through the sleep habits. For certain cases, sleep aids are helpful. I think some of the helpful ones, a small dose of melatonin can be helpful. If people are going to do like a prescription medication, you might ask about something like trazodone, which is like an anti-anxiety medication, but isn't like habit forming. People can stop it without, I don't know. I have a lot of patients that have taken Ambien and they have a really hard time quitting because we prioritize sleep. We love sleep. So like the threat of something disrupting that, I think is really threatening to people. But trazodone kind of helps calm the mind so that we kind of get out of the rat race of like thinking about life. Sometimes that might be a helpful one. But honestly, like pills are a nice quick solution, but like all these habits, which are, I know a lot, this is the work. And a pill doesn't, unfortunately, shortcut this work, I don't think. The other issue is all the things that disrupt our sleep. So, I didn't want to go down that road with this talk, but there are actual sleep medical issues, right? The most common one being sleep apnea, which, again, you can be unconscious for 8 hours. You think you slept 8 hours, but with sleep apnea, your brain is waking up 5, 10, 50 times an hour, making sure you breathe. So you wake up tired because your brain didn't sleep at all. Your eyes were shut and you think you slept, but your brain didn't sleep at all. So if people are finding like, man, my sleep isn't restful, looking into a sleep study to make sure we don't have sleep apnea. You don't have to be overweight to have sleep apnea. It's an increased risk, but you can be skinny mini and have sleep apnea. You don't have to snore to have sleep apnea. So yeah, these things are increased risk for sleep apnea, but like people don't have to have those things to have sleep apnea. There's other things, especially as we get older, like bladder issues. So I'm waking up 4 times a night to pee. It's hard to fall back asleep. So I mean, it's easy to get up here and say like just do all the right things and it'll get better. But there are other like medical issues like back pain or pain in general that kind of disrupt our sleep. And is there a role for medication to control those things so that my sleep ends up being better? Person dependent, I guess I'll say. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Other thoughts, questions? Were the brownies good? All right, good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, I hope everyone has a good sleep.